Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming to our bus Q&A. We're here with a live audience and you may well be watching the recording afterwards. On top of a variety of emails, we've received about over 180 online responses in our recent bus provision survey, which includes some questions submitted for tonight's Q&A. Just a few administrative bits for those here in person. We are filming today's session. So if you have any queries or concerns, please do come speak to a member of staff. And if you ask a question by microphone, your voice will be part of this recording. We're not expecting any fire drills, so in the event of alarm, please calmly make your way to one of the exits at the corner of the room. As the Students' Union, we wanted to put on this event to facilitate a conversation between bus operators, the university, and students at the university, to see what various stakeholders think and feel and communicate that to those who can make change. The purpose of this event is to give students the opportunities to hear about the work that the university and operators are doing in conjunction with each other, and ask directly questions to our panel members. So some introductions. I'm Alexander, the Students' Union President. I'm chairing today's discussion. And I'm here with 4 speakers who I'd like to invite to introduce themselves, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Porter. I'm the Head of Security for the University of Bath. And you might think, why is he here? I'm not expecting any problems. Historically, transport has sat under security, and it still does. So we are here working closely, obviously, with transport providers, and we are here 24/7. I also control a lot of the safe zone messages. So when you see a safe zone message come out, it's probably been generated by me. So, but I'll come on to that a bit later on. But good evening and nice to meet you all.
Good evening. My name's Tom Hughes. I'm the operations manager for First Bus in Bath. I also cover Wells. So I'm basically responsible for the day-to-day running of all the First Buses around Bath and slightly further outwards.
Evening, I'm Alan Peters. I'm Managing Director of A-Bus that operates the 22 and probably the longest serving bus person in the area.
Evening everyone, my name is Ian Blencarn. I'm Director of Education and Student Services here at the university. I've only been here about 9 months, so I haven't gone through a full academic cycle yet. And when I was interviewing for this post last year, the last thing I thought I'd be getting involved in was buses, but it felt to me like a really important student experience issue, which is why I kind of volunteered to try and get involved. And I've now got these lovely people on my speed dial, which I never expected to have when I first started. So thank you for coming, thank you for your questions, and we look forward to trying to answer them.
Thank you very much for introducing yourselves. Also to note that we did also invite 2 local politicians to this event. Vera Hobhouse, who's our MP for Bath, who was unable to attend due to parliamentary engagements, and Dan Norris, Metro Mayor of the West of England, who's provided us with a statement of which I'm going to read a quick excerpt from. So, Dan Norris. Across our region and the rest of the UK, we've seen wave upon wave of damaging bus cuts, whilst delays and cancellations to local services have become all too common. This is a big deal for the individuals and communities directly impacted, and this is the issue that keeps me awake at night, anxious as Metro Mayor to get things sorted as quickly as possible here in the West of England. The huge problem impacting more than any other, though, is that there are simply not enough drivers. We're about 200 short. It's why we're seeing bus operators up and down the land, Bath included, cutting back on the services they provide, even where I've made financial support available to operators like First. The last thing we want to see or need is fewer buses. Whilst this is a difficult time for so many Bathonians, including students, I urge everyone to take advantage of our cheaper fares. It's now just £2 for a single in Bath, and to use the buses that are running. This is important in creating a virtuous cycle of more fare income from more passengers, and so more investment to help ensure better buses for all in the future. This is important for all the obvious reasons, but also essential if we're to meet our hugely ambitious 2030 net zero target here in the West of England. So that's a statement from Dan Norris, Metro Mayor. So I'd like to start, if I may, by posing a question to you all. From your perspective, what do you think are the main challenges to having a successful bus network here in the City of Bath? So Mike or Ian, if you'd like to start. Mike?
I think firstly, the geography. Bath was never designed for buses. when you see, just on a very practical level, when you see about hold-ups in Bath or buses delayed, it's very easy to think, oh, there's not enough buses running, or there's an issue with the buses. It's more frequently issues with the traffic situation in Bath. There are very few bus lanes, the roads aren't designed for it. There's some bus gates, but that doesn't help. When you've got temporary traffic lights on the Lower Bristol Road, or you've got other issues where traffic isn't moving, then the buses can't move. So all I would say, if you're a bus user, please keep that in mind. I know it's frustrating, and it's certainly going to be an ongoing challenge. But we are looking as a university at transport across the whole environment. So geographically, we are dictated to by a very big hill. So we have got to look at other ways we can deal with that. And to be solely reliant on buses, I think is a little bit naive. We've got to move forward and look at other ways around transport. And we are working, certainly myself and Ian, we are on various transport working groups at the moment. We are also employing a dedicated transport manager who will be looking not only at transport generally, but carbon reduction, accessibility, and putting together a plan moving forward. So we've got something that's going to be resilient longer term.
Shall I just pick up from Mike? I mean, I think Mike's covered all of the main points. The hills strikes me as the big barrier to other forms of transport to and from the campus, particularly walking, cycling, which just doesn't become an option for lots of students and staff, of course. One of the things we have done this year, as you may have noticed, is we've extended the Voy scooter scheme so that electric scooters can now come up Widcombe Hill. I know that's not proved perfect in all circumstances, and there have been some failures halfway up with abandoned scooters on the side of the road, and Voy are working with us on trying to resolve that. But what we're trying to do is just provide some alternatives to the bus situation for those where an e-scooter might work. And from personal experience, although it was driving rain last week, I did get a train in from where I live in Bristol, a scooter up the hill, a scooter down, without any problem. So, if you are interested in trying them out, I think they can be a good alternative. They're relatively good value, and as a student, you also get discounts off the Voy passes. So, although we're talking about buses tonight, we are, as Mike says, exploring lots of other forms of transport to and from, not only because of the issues we face with buses, but also because of our desire to get to net zero.
Thank you. Would either of the bus operators like to respond?
So I think the answer to that question is probably twofold from our perspective. So as Mike said, with regards to issues around traffic, we can go from having a perfectly fine afternoon to 5 minutes later, everything's stopped and it's not running. And that can be from roadworks springing up or just sheer levels of traffic, rain, and there aren't many sort of routes around Bath for alternative routes for cars to take. And obviously the buses have to generally stick to the routes that they use. We try to make our timetables as resilient as we can. However, you can't predict for every single scenario, and we can't plan for a Thursday afternoon where at 2 o'clock everything's going to stop running. What we do try to do is build enough time into it so they've got recovery time at the end, but if the traffic does get so bad, then we have to start missing out the trips because drivers are only allowed to drive for a certain amount of time during the day and for certain periods. So better infrastructure for buses would be one of the key things that I would like, because more bus lanes means there's much more freedom for buses to move through the city much quicker, and therefore we can provide a far more reliable service. And the other point is, as Dan alluded to in his statement, there aren't enough drivers out there. So it's not just an issue in the west of England, but the entire bus industry is struggling to get drivers at the moment. I've got agencies that are helping us out, but they aren't a long-term solution, and trying to recruit more drivers not only takes time, but also trying to get drivers interested, potential drivers interested, and people seeing bus driving as a career when you've got other industries such as retail and coffee shops and even to train drivers. There aren't enough people out there for the jobs that are available. Now we're working hard to recruit, we are working hard to recruit more drivers. It's one of our main focuses at the moment. You might have seen we've got a bus that's just been painted up, for example, advertising the role of a bus driver. We've put our salary up as well, so bus drivers can earn £27,000 now. But again, it's just getting those people interested in driving in through the door and out driving buses.
Just to emphasise the traffic situation, on the 22, 2 weeks ago, we had a bus take 3 hours to go from here to Twerton and back on an afternoon. And it therefore lost 2 journeys just because of the traffic. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned is the financial situation. Most services are operated on the money they take through the fare box, and they are extremely expensive to operate. I would estimate, and you might agree, that each bus costs a minimum of £600 per day to operate. And that's a hell of a lot of £2 fares, to be honest.
Just adding on from that, during COVID, the bus companies were, through WECA, provided a subsidy. That subsidy has stopped. And the actual passenger numbers now, compared to pre-COVID, have probably dropped by about 20-25%. So there's an automatic loss in revenue there as well. And bear in mind, the bus companies, we work very well, very closely with the 2 bus companies that are represented here tonight. But you have to bear in mind, they are commercial businesses. They are trying to survive in a very, very difficult marketplace at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. Then the next question is on a specific route. So earlier in the year, we were made aware that 20 and the 22 faced cancellations from First, and they stopped being run as services. And Alan, your company Abus jumped in to run a replacement service. We had a question from one of our students. Why is there not a like-for-like replacement for that service at the moment? Why did the times change and less frequent? And are there plans in future to develop that further?
What happened with the 22 is I saw that it was on the list of supported services that First... WECA, the West of England Authority, put out a number of tenders to start in September. They had such a high price that they cancelled that tender round and asked all operators to continue the existing services until next April. First, because of their driver shortage, elected not to take on a number of those tenders because they wanted to concentrate, and you might confirm not, the drivers so that they could concentrate them on the U1 and U2 from here. I run a school bus, and that was the only thing we were running, actually, 2 school buses to Ralph Allen School. And the taking off the 22 left us in a situation where we felt those school buses could be overloaded. So we went to WECA with a proposal that we could operate some 22s using 1 driver and 1 bus, and produced a timetable that I admit doesn't work. Based on the timetable that was existing, and we ended up starting it at 15 hours notice because WECA had failed to tell us that First we're finishing before the start of the university term, not at the October the 10th, which is the date the other services were changing. We started the service. After 3 weeks, we changed the morning timetable slightly, and that now works. And I have to admit, the afternoon, probably 50% of days, is a disaster. But we're left with the fact that, we have got 4 buses, 4 double-deck buses, and we use 3 every day. So we got 1 spare, but we haven't got the facility to provide anything extra, and we haven't got the facility, we haven't got the room where we're operating from to operate any more than that. So the 22 is what it is because there was nobody else available who could do anything at all. WECA for next April have put out a tender suggesting a 15-minute frequency service. We were talking about this before the meeting, and in honesty, I don't see any operator in the area with the facility to actually manage to provide that amount of vehicles and that amount of drivers to operate that service. And I have a fear that at the end of the day, there will be no bidders for it. I certainly won't be able to bid for it on that form, although I will put in an optional bid.
Thank you very much. Do you have a company in you?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. Obviously, the 22 has been a really difficult issue for us to resolve. And, you know, I'm not here to defend or promote the bus services, but I have to say I was really, really grateful to Alan and his company for stepping in at the last minute to run the 22. I think everyone needs to know there's a very real possibility that there would have been no 22 running at all, and therefore there would have been a real gap in provision for anyone who lived along the route of the 22. So although it's not perfect, although it is not a like-for-like service compared to what was running last year, it is better than nothing, and I think it is also helping to serve that community. Although the frequency of the journeys is not the same as last year, what we were keen to do as an institution was make sure that the bandwidth of the timetable was broadly similar, and actually we've funded an extension of the timetable to go to at least 6:20. That's the final departure from the university, simply because we understand that students may have made a decision about living along that route on the expectation that the 22 would be running, and therefore we wanted to try and protect the bandwidth. But as Alan says, it's not a like-for-like translation of the old timetable, and there are still problems. But again, Alan's been very responsive to our feedback and very proactive in asking us about changes to the timetable to make it more reliable and resilient, and for that we're very grateful.
Thank you very much. Thomas, do you have any comments you want to say about the 22 route before we move on to the next question?
So, yeah, I suppose I'd just give that bit of context, which Alan alluded to, but as I mentioned, we do have a shortage of drivers. It's not just a West of England issue, it's not just a First Bus issue, it's over the entire country. And we had to make the decision, and it wasn't an easy decision, to withdraw some of our services in Bath and some in Bristol, and I know some of our other operating companies elsewhere have done similar things to make sure we can operate what we say we will. So traditionally, I think when the university term goes back in, the bus service in Bath as a whole tends to suffer, whether that be, you know, non-university services or the university services. And I was quite keen, with this being my first year here, to make sure that didn't happen. So we've actually had a much better year in the sense of we're running pretty much everything we say we will run. There are some exceptions to that with traffic, or, you know, if sickness gets increased, or we unfortunately have breakdowns. But to make sure we were able to operate a decent level of service on the U1 and U2, as well as the rest of our network, that is why we had to make the unfortunate decision to withdraw the 22.
Thank you very much for your comments. A question now to our panel members from the university. Excuse me. We've had several students get in touch with us in the SU in relation to not feeling safe when having to walk home following the stop of the bus service, the 22, at the end of the day, especially as it's getting darker in the evenings with poor weather. And we think this sort of clearly impacts on our students' experience here. How might you respond to those students about their situation?
So, I don't mind leading off, Mike, and then I'll hand to Mike. I mean, clearly, student safety is of paramount importance to us, and I think this issue goes a lot deeper than talking about specific bus routes. Everybody should feel safe when they're travelling to and from, even if that means being after dark. as I said at the beginning, we were facing the very real possibility of the 22 not running at all this year, and we wanted to get to a point where we at least protected the bandwidth of that service. If there are journeys that need to be made after 6:20, then there are other options. They're not necessarily as palatable, and I know they're going to be much more lengthy in terms of time and potentially more expensive as well. But for example, the route that was available to that community, given that the 22 wasn't going to exist, was going into town and then coming back on the U1 and U2. And the U1 and U2 does run 24/7 to provide safe and secure services for our community. So that would be a possibility. Of course, there are other options which individuals might want to explore around car sharing or taxi sharing, those sorts of things. But at the moment, I think I'd like to make this a bigger issue than just talking about buses. And actually, as part of our transport working group that Mike alluded to earlier, I think we need to define some principles about what we want our transport strategy to be into the medium and long term. I think sustainability is right up there, but it also needs to be reliable and safe and secure. And I think those are the things that we're going to sort of hold dear when it comes to defining our strategy for the next few years.
Yeah, thank you. Just leading on from that, Bath as a city is one of the safest cities in the UK. We are fortunate to have that reputation. That doesn't remove the fact that some people may still feel nervous if they're walking home in the dark or whatever. You should always consider your own personal safety and how you feel. We have got, does everybody know about the Safe Zone app? Silence. I think so. There's a few nods. This is good. The Safe Zone app is a free app which is funded by the university. It's run through the university. You download it through the App Store on your phone. You use your usual login credentials for Bath University, and you'll be able to download the app. You complete certain details on that, and if you've got the app on, and this is if you're in Bath, even if you're outside Bath, if you've got the app on, you feel insecure, there's a problem, press the alert button. Once you download the app, you have this big red button on your screen. If you activate that, that sends an alarm into the control room here at the university, the security control room. It automatically shows all your details, your GPS location, and we will then immediately ring you, because we do get, obviously, false activations. And we will check on if it's a false activation or if you do have an issue or concern. If you have a particular concern, we will come out and support you. Yes, we do have limited resources, but we have resources that are constantly mobile and they're out and about. As you know, we've got facilities and accommodation in the city. But we will do everything we can to support you. So if you haven't got the app, please download that app. The other benefit of the app, if we have problems with the buses, now we have got 2 members of staff that are called Transport Customer Liaison staff. They are employees of the university. They are 2 of my staff who are based at the Arrival Square. They work hand in glove with First Bus and the First Bus operational staff. We deal with what we call live intelligence. If there's an issue and we think it's going to delay services or cause problems, my staff down there will contact me. I will put out a Safe Zone message. Bearing in mind, I have access and I operate 24/7. So if you haven't got the Safe Zone app, please download it. It's good for just general personal safety and reassurance, but also if there's any issues going on, especially around the buses, we can get messages out to you immediately. It'll come out as a text message on your phone. So please keep that in mind. But moving forward, when we're planning, and as Ian said, we're looking at transport right across the board. We're taking on a transport manager who will be dedicated to looking at transport in the whole, but part of that remit will be looking at the safety aspect as well. Yes, we live in a very safe city. We're very fortunate, but we can't become complacent. But it's also about reassurance. It's about making sure our community is reassured when they're out in the community and they're using public transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is probably to the bus operators. Could we ask you to explain to students how current bus prices are set? And what is your message to students who might have queries about whether they're getting value for money on the services that they're using?
So the structure we use to set fares is quite a complicated one, and I won't pretend to understand all the ins and outs of it. There's a lot of people with spreadsheets who work out this and work out that. But generally, I think on average it can be anywhere from 170,000 to 250,000 pounds to keep a bus sort of profitable a year. Now, we are a private company. As Mike mentioned about we had funding during COVID. We're coming to the end of that funding now. So at the start of COVID, we were under funding model, which basically meant we could break even. The reason that was put in place by the government was because otherwise there was a real risk that bus operators just simply wouldn't be able to exist anymore. If we're driving a bus around, it's still using fuel. We've still got to pay for the driver. We've still got to pay for the tyres. Now, post-COVID, we have recovered to about 76% of our pre-COVID levels, except buses often seem busier than that, but people are travelling fewer times a week, which means the buses are sort of getting used more at certain periods, but not throughout the week, and therefore we're taking less revenue. Though we've put in the tap-on, tap-off system for the university services, whereas they're the only services in the west of England that actually tap and cap at a student price. So if you tap on and tap off on the U1, it will only charge you £1.50 single, whereas any of the other services you use will be £2. So we're trying to put easy to use ways onto our services that let you use the services in a cost effective way. We've also got the M-Ticket app, which offers you a discount across the year. But that funding that I mentioned is coming to an end. It's going to be replaced by another form of funding in April, but it's more complicated in the sense it's from the local authorities and it's about infrastructure and new bus routes and things like that. It's not really there to support current bus services. So therefore, we have unfortunately had to it's been a bit up and down because there have been fare schemes from the government and from WECA, so they've introduced a £2 flat fare single within Bath and within Bristol, and there's a £3.70 maximum single anywhere in the west of England. So there's a lot of things going on, and that might not really answer the question, but what I'm trying to say is there's a lot going on at the moment into why the fares are what they are, and actually where they need to be for the future, because when that funding ends in April, the services are going to have to stand on their own and they're going to have to make themselves pay. And going back to the driver shortages quickly, not to sound too much like a broken record, but we've had to put a pay increase for our drivers, which has been around 14%, just to stay competitive. And we've also got the issues around rising fuel costs, as everyone may have noticed, but it's not cheap to fill up a bus with a tank of diesel. And then other things such as the parts we use for the engines or the gearboxes, that's all gone up and it's all taken longer to get. So our costs are going up and up, and therefore, once this funding ends, the only sort of way we've got to pay for that, unfortunately, is through fares.
Dan Norris will tell you, the WECA Mayor, that bus industry inflation last year, or in the last year, is running at 45%. The general inflation level is 12, I think, or 10 to 12. Bus industry costs are increasing at 45%. A lot of this is fuel, a lot of this is wages. What happens in April is that WECA get an amount of money to actually provide better facilities in the hope that better facilities will attract more people and therefore more passengers will travel and therefore there'll be more income. Whether that actually works or not, I severely doubt, but that is the government policy. But there again, there is a budget next Thursday, I think it is, that might take that money away from them. And in that case, it's going to be a really awkward situation they're on in.
Well, thank you very much. That concludes the initial questions from me. We'd now like to open up questions to the students in the audience. If you have a question, could you please raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you could wait until one of our staff members gets a microphone to you first. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? Could we go with the mic, please?
Hello. I've come as part of the Bath University Left Union, as a couple of us here, and we've started a campaign group for fair student transport, as we've seen this issue ramp up and not get any better, and just have a totally unreliable service and have this in the name of profiteering. And recently, I think it was actually today, there was a no confidence vote by the North Somerset Council, and this was about greater council control over the bus service. And I think that this is the only way to go forward, because how the framework of the discussion has been this evening has been how private companies cannot hold these services. Well, that does not have to be the case, because if you look to cities like Preston and the Preston model of public transport, and if you look at the services that have happened in Greater Manchester with bus franchising, with 86% people in support on the first consultation, 82% in support on the second consultation. So this is an incredibly popular idea, and I feel like this framework of having private companies operate these services is not that one that can be sustainable. So I would like to ask to members of the University of Bath about supporting this, because the idea of having other public transport to the university, like VOI, I think is quite ridiculous in the sense, because the idea of these services having a great amount of students on them is unfeasible, and if they did have a great amount of students on them, they would become an issue in themselves. So I think it's free buses that we need to get to university, and through this model of private companies just does not work. So I'd just like to say, is there any other way rather than private companies having this control over bus services, or can we move, like North Somerset Council today, towards a no confidence vote and greater council control over the bus service?
Ian, would you like to take that, or
Okay. As parts of Buses Back Better that Boris put forward and put £3 billion into, unfortunately COVID then happened, and £2 billion of that was spent supporting existing bus services, and the rest is some of the money that WECA are getting in April. There is more control by councils of bus services, but it's costly. You talked about Manchester. I think you talked about Preston, and I don't know what you're on about at Preston, to be perfectly honest. I've never heard of anything at Preston. But Manchester have spent millions setting up franchising, and it's not got anywhere yet. London is the only franchise system in the country, and London are cutting 20 to 25% of bus services because the underground that was supporting them isn't carrying the people, and therefore they can't afford them. To quote an example, we'll say one of his buses on U1 costs £1,000 to operate on a week or whatever. It costs £1,000 to operate. At the moment, he takes the fares, keeps the fares, and he might get £1,020, he might get £900, he might get £1,200. But he takes the risk. It always costs him £1,000 to run. If it went to franchising, it would still cost him £1,000 to run, but the local authority or the franchisor would keep the revenue and pay what it costs to run. So if it was me, I would then quote 1,200 so I could guarantee my 20% profit. And that is where franchising, in my opinion, falls down.
So I will try and provide an answer to this question, but I'm going to caveat this by saying I probably won't do it justice. I mean, I really like your enthusiasm, though. You know, the stats that you've dug into and provided with us tonight are really interesting. But I suppose brass tacks, my priority is to make sure that we get the very best service for our community of staff and students. We are, of course, engaged in those local discussions with WECA, with local council, about how we improve the situation for the university, but also the wider population. It's a shame we don't have our politician colleagues on the panel tonight, because they would probably be better placed to understand the politics behind privatisation or public ownership. But I suppose I would just say I think there are potential benefits for us as a community for the way things are structured at the moment, in the sense that I know that the U1 and the U2 is a good service for First to run. And I've been absolutely staggered by the volume of passenger journeys that take place on a daily basis. Upwards of 15,000 on an average day, Monday to Friday. If we put that entirely into the hands of the council, they would have other competing pressures other than simply serving the university, and they may dilute the service that we get here at the university. So I understand where you're coming from. I think there are significant political barriers to achieving what you've described. And for us, we need to balance what's best for the entire community and the region as a whole, but also be quite selfish about saying we need a really good service for our staff and student community. And at the moment, we seem to be getting a decent service. It's never perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say it is, but we have good partners. They're here tonight. They're engaged with us, and they're willing to listen and make changes, which is positive.
Just to add to that, we have historically looked at running our own bus service. The costs involved are horrendous, and it's just completely off scope. Regarding our relationship with First, this has been growing stronger and stronger each year. Just to give you a quick snapshot example, myself and Tom, we meet certainly on a fortnightly, if not weekly basis, to discuss any issues, both from their perspective and our perspective, and they are very good to respond and to react. When we plan the new semester each year, their timetabling manager, usually Dan Ashworth, is in direct contact with our timetabling team here at the university to look at how buses, what time the buses need to run, what volume of buses we need for when the lectures are. And they go to great lengths to make sure we get as best a service as possible to meet those demands. Because as you appreciate, during the day, the demand peaks vary. Also, we have to explore that we need a bus service to run into the night, because we have students living up here who want to go down and enjoy the bars and restaurants in Bath and come back early hours of the morning. So First have been able to accommodate us on that. So they are doing, bearing in mind they've got huge challenges within their industry, they are working very closely with us, they are listening, and where they're able to respond, they do, and they respond very quickly. Another example is when we had some issues the other week. We had some U2 buses coming onto campus, and they were empty. We were desperately short of U1 because of the hold-ups in the town, and First immediately changed the U2 to a U1 to get people off campus. So the flexibility they are showing, I would suggest, is actually quite unusual, and they have been really supporting the university community. As Ian said, it's not perfect. there is never going to be a perfect solution. But I have to say, I've been impressed with the way they first engage and obviously assist, and I'm thankful to A-Bus for picking up on the 22 with literally hours' notice. But we are here, we listen, and we want to react, and we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your responses. Is there any other questions? Over there. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yep, right. This is going to be 2 questions, but I think I'll probably give the easier question first. The U2 tends to be quite sparsely run around the inter-semester break and the revision assessment weeks. For the fact that the 22 is cancelled, will the first bus be trying to make sure that the U2 runs a lot more during that period?
So what we normally do is, because obviously fewer people use the buses during those periods of time, we put the sort of longer U1 in, which means we can actually use less resource. If the demand requires it, we can have a look at it. You know, I'm not saying what we do is fixed. I'm always open to look into what we can do to make things better. We've only got a limited amount of resource, but I can certainly look at it. I can't make any promises, but as Mike said, I meet with Mike at least once a fortnight. And any issues that are coming up, he always lets me know about, and we have these conversations, so I'm more than happy to look at it.
Yeah, the reason why I say that is because I was one of the people that used to use the first bus 22, and a lot of students who live in South Down and Twerton, which affected the 20 and the 22 running, bought their first bus ticket in advance of the university semester starting. So I'm sure the A-bus route is running to the best of its ability. However, I'm not sure that affects many students. A lot of students who live in the 20 and the 22 area now have to rely on using either the 1 or the 5 in order to get to Lawn Road. I think that the bus stop Burn Hayes around Lawn Road. And I've had talks with fellow students and also members of the general public about the need for more 1s and 5s to run, especially in the evenings. I understand that there's not enough drivers. However, this is just generally what I'm hearing from both staff and students. I think there's a main issue around from 5:30 p.m. onwards, with the 1 not running as much as it should be. Like, there's a lot of general public and students that are completely crammed onto buses. People are ending up having to kind of stand past the line. I don't know what the technical term is, but there's a line on the ground where people are not meant to stand in order for the driver to properly drive. So there's also the safety issue, which a lot of people who use the 1 in the afternoon have raised. So I understand that there's issues with the 22 had to get cancelled, but a lot of us are just concerned with how we're meant to be getting home.
No, I understand that, and you know, obviously referring to the safety issues, I would hope we wouldn't be sort of having people stood further than they should be, and I will have a look at that. Again, the 1 and the 5 is something I would like to operate more frequently in the evenings, but it comes down to not having enough drivers. The 1 more so than the 5 is also particularly difficult in you can't really put long buses on it because of the nature of the route it takes. But I will have a look because there are certain types of double-decker, for example, that we can fit around that route. So I'll have a look at what buses we've got on there in the short term to see if we can increase the capacity in that way to make sure that everybody can get a seat and get home.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because I've heard beforehand that occasionally there are double-decker 1s, and I think that would probably be quite a good thing to do if you have the resources available.
I'm unfortunately a bit short of double-deckers at the moment, but I am trying to get some more in for that, so hopefully soon we'll be able to get some on there.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions?
So this is specifically directed to the man from First Bus. Given that on top of their cuts to the 11, the 12, the 20, the 22, the 42 and the 171, and other cuts of recent years to the 9, the D3, 37 and probably other bus routes, are First Bus not simply presiding over an extended period of decline in public transport in Bath? And what are we going to do about it? I understand there's no silver bullet, there's nothing that can happen immediately that will magically make everything better. But it almost feels like there's an acceptance of decline here, and that's what's really worrying, that things are just not going to get better. That everything is just a bit of a mess. I'm sorry, but we can't do anything about it.
Okay, so some of that happened before I was the operations manager for Bath, the D3, etc. The 11, 12, 22, 20, they were all tenders, which were out for other operators to take, but as far as I'm aware, either the bids were too expensive or nobody had the drivers to do it. My job isn't here to cut bus services and make the network smaller and smaller and smaller. What I want to do is, provide the best network that we can. At the moment, yeah, we are short of drivers, but as I said earlier, my main focus is to fix that problem. And then, if we can get more drivers in, we can operate things more reliably, and then we can have a look at what other opportunities are out there. So I can see what you're saying, and some of this also has to go down to WECA. So, if they can provide support for new services, which is potentially what might come in the next year's bus service improvement plans and everything planned from April, then, if we're in a position with drivers and vehicles, then, we always look at what opportunities are out there. So I'm not here to oversee it decline and get smaller and smaller and smaller. I genuinely want to provide a better service. And the reason we did cut some of the routes that we did was so we could actually operate what we say we will. I know there's nothing more frustrating. I use the bus, I drive the buses occasionally, and I know there's nothing more frustrating when it says on the timetable there's going to be a bus and then it just doesn't turn up. Now, more so than we have been for the past few years, if the timetable says a bus is going to run, it should run.
In First Defence, in the years prior to COVID, year on year for 5 years, First West of England, and we were actually operating jointly with them on a number of services then, had passenger growth of 10% a year for 5 years, which was completely against the general trend in England. I think in Great Britain, to be honest. COVID hit them really hard, and things like the D3 that you mentioned was competed with by Fairsaver, and in actual fact, they were just doubling the number of vehicles on it. So therefore, First gave it up and let Fairsaver take it, who provide a perfectly adequate service for that. The 18, which is another one that got cut very quickly, was the withdrawal of money by WECA because they didn't have any money. And in actual fact, over the years of deregulation, 90% of bus service cuts have been to council-supported services. The majority of commercially operated services still operate.
I was just going to use this as a brief opportunity just to build on the point I made in my previous answer, which was to say that, I think First were in a very difficult position. They were very open with us. They called a meeting to talk about their pressures within the region. And that's where, as a valued stakeholder, I would go so far as a partner in this, we were able to say it's really, really important to us that you protect the U1 and the U2 in particular, because that's such a central service for our student and staff community. So, we were in the room, we're, having a positive relationship. I think you're right, there is a general decline in bus services. I think, a lot of that is around centralised government funding and the pressures of the pandemic. But given that very particular squeeze on First, they were very open with us and they were very responsive to us saying we need to protect the U1 and U2.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. If we could go to in the middle there. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for organising this and being here. Very grateful for the existence of the number 22 bus. I'm wondering what can be done to provide us with more information, for example, if the bus, this could apply to first as well, if a bus is running late and we need to know if it's worthwhile giving up on that bus at that time or not for the stops around Bath that don't have a display board. It's probably a technical problem for me to work out myself. I seem unable to send texts to 5-digit numbers, so I can't use that service. I don't know if there's any possible thought if it would be easy to do, either an app or just a simple little basic web page, nothing frills with live arrivals and departures. Also, just a second little point. Might be a long shot, but are all opportunities being explored, both by the university perhaps, for any wealthy alumni or local businesses to contribute in any way that they could? For example, someone could have their name or their organisation allied with a promotional short video on local television advertising bus driving as a great career, or one of those little display boards at a place that doesn't have it could have the name of the person who sponsored it, or anything like that, or even the name on the side of a bus that is saved or acquired. I don't know much about business, so that might be naive, but it's just a thought that occurred to me. Anyway, thank you.
The 22 is, there is an app called bustimes.org that if you go on it, look for a bus, or type in a bus 22, it will bring up the 22. On it there is a map which will show you the position of the bus at the time. If you then press vehicles, it lists the individual journeys and tells you what time the bus was at the stops compared to the time it should be at the stops. There are limitations to it. For instance, if a driver accidentally presses 1 instead of 2 when putting in the time, it won't actually compare the times with the journey. But generally, the map shows the position of the bus. It's what I use to check where they are. The 22 should be on the real-time information boards. I actually noticed it on the way in that it was on at Ogdown when I came through, that it was actually showing the wrong side of the road, which I'll deal with tomorrow. But it was actually showing on one side of the road going in both directions, and I can't quite work out why that should be. But bustimes.org is a good system, and it should show the U1s, and well, it shows everything. If you go on it as a general map, it should show every bus in Bath.
So, and just from First, we have our own app, it's called First Bus. It'll pick up where you are, you can click on the stop, it'll give you all the live departures. We put on there if something's not running, so it'll say cancelled. It shows you how many seats are free, and it'll show you exactly where it is. And with regards to the display boards, I'm currently undertaking a piece of work with WECA, who run the boards, to make sure that my inspectors and supervisors can make sure if we aren't running something, it shows up as cancelled on there. There's been a few technical issues with the software, but I'm told it's all sorted out now. So any cancelled journeys should start showing on the boards as well.
Thank you very much.
Can I just make one other comment? There is some comments I've received about the lack of card payments on 22. We took it on at 15 hours notice in the end, although we did in theory have 2 weeks. But we haven't got our own ticket machines. Our own ticket machines will take 12 weeks to come. And with that, our own payment account and stuff like that. At the moment, we're using ticket machines from a company that went bust in Bristol, CT Plus. and together with 3 other companies that have stepped in to cover their work, and we have no access to the back office of those ticket machines, and anything paid by card would go into CT Plus's that are in administration account and therefore be lost forever. It's something we're working on, but for some reason it takes 12 weeks to open a bank account to get cash, to get card payments. But hopefully by the end of this month, we should have them.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes our questions. Do we have time for, a quick one? Yeah, okay, absolutely.
So I did some research this morning, and the groups, First Buses groups, adjusted attributable profit increase to 36.2 million from the financial year of 2021 to 2022. And I was wondering what the projected profits are going to be in 2023, if this is just, if the increase in prices will mean that also we're contributing towards increased profits for First Bus.
So I'll be honest with you, I'm not the best person to talk to about First Group's accounts, because First Group also covers the other bus companies we've got in the UK, and it also covers the rail business, and we're also in a closed financial period, so I can't discuss the financials, even if I knew them. But to be honest, the group's finances I don't know. I manage Bath and Wells, and I have knowledge of the west of England, and that's the extent of my knowledge on the financials.
As a First Group shareholder, I would say that First Group shareholders have received 1 penny per share in total since 2010. In 2010, the shares were £8 each. Today, they're about £1.05. So shareholders who bought shares at £8 have lost £7 a share and received a dividend of 1 penny in 10 years. So they're not in as sound a financial position as the accounts seem to show. And a lot of that money was by sale of American Greyhound in America and things like that.
Well, thank you very much. Do you have any comments you'd like to make before the end of this session? Is there anything you'd...
First, I just wanted to say thank you to you for setting up the session, and also to First and to ABUS for representing. Thank you very much for being here. It's been really helpful for me. I know we haven't had a huge amount of people in the room, but I hope people are watching online. And some of the questions have actually got me thinking about things we could do as part of our transport working group. So I think it's been really valuable, and just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to answer the questions.
Well,
Just very briefly, again, just reiterating what my fellow panelists have said. Thank you very much. It's really helpful. As I said before, I've got 2 members of staff that are based at the Arrival Square. If you have any issues, any problems, or you think there's something that needs to be fed back to us, either urgently because it's operational or any other matter, please speak to them. They will feed it directly back to me. Okay, and if it's something that we can get dealt with, we will get on deal with it. So there is a direct information route which you can use to report back. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity for this. And I know we don't always get things right, but we do try hard, and actually we want to deliver a decent service. That's why I come into work every day, and I know that's the same reason the drivers do as well. And if anybody knows anybody who wants to be a bus driver, send them down to the bus station and, let us know. But thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to ask questions and listen to the responses from our panel members, and thank you for being here this evening. And that concludes this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.